The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Steven Sakach here again with my co-host Tullio Siragusa, and we've got a special guest who we'll introduce in a moment. So according to Harvard Business Review, companies that prioritize customer experience and trust outperform competitors in revenue growth and profitability. And as organizations scale, maintaining connection becomes more complex and also becomes more critical. So the ability to deliver consistently on a brand promise while building trust is often the challenge. Today, we're exploring how leaders can build community and connection in ways that directly impact growth, performance, and long-term success. Tullio, introduce our special guest today.
Happy to. Our guest today is Matt Dyer, who is the CEO and president of Merchant Fleets, where he leads the company's strategic focus on delivering consistent client value and driving sustainable growth. Under his leadership, Merchants has strengthened its position as a strategic partner, helping organizations navigate modern fleet complexities while improving performance and long-term results. With decades of global experience, Matt is recognized for building high-performing organizations through operational excellence and innovation. Before joining Merchants, he served as CEO of LeasePlan USA, where he led significant transformation initiatives and played a key role in the successful integration with Wheels. His earlier career includes serving as CEO of LeasePlan UK and as chairman of UK's Vehicle Rental and Leasing Trade Association. Thanks for being with us today, Matt. We're looking forward to our discussion. Welcome to the Bliss Business Podcast.
Thank you, Tullio. Amazing introduction. Thank you for all of that, and great to be with you, Stephen, as well. So, yeah, delighted to be joining with you and looking forward to contributing to such a great topic today.
Yeah, this is going to be fun, and especially you're in this industry that's going through all these changes, as we mentioned before, show with autonomous vehicles and things, and you guys are poised for all those changes, but changes can be challenging. So we're going to get into it a little bit. So, Matt, community, it's often seen as something kind of intangible, but in your experience, especially leading large organizations, how does that community translate into the measurable business outcomes, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Stephen, the biggest one I would pick out is how community, plays out for your clients. What is community? It's values, it's behaviors, it's teamwork, team spirit, it's the sense of collaboration. And when you're in a business like we are, where effectively we're an outsourcing business, companies, our clients are outsourcing operation of their vehicles to us. And, that's a core business for them. These are all mission critical vehicles. So community really needs to show up for the client. And, I think about the breadth that we offer as a business, everything from buying the vehicle, funding it, servicing it, maintaining it, fueling it. This is a real breadth. So it brings complexity. So to really deliver for our clients, our teams have to really play and collaborate well. And that's where community really has the most tangible outcome. We have a role to deliver a great service, but that comes with overcoming issues and challenges. And how our team comes together to do that is really an important part of how we need to differentiate ourselves in the market. And the message I consistently bring to our company is, us as organizations, we all find our way into these divisional silos, but clients never see us like that. They always see us across the horizontal. So it's our job to make sure we don't show up to reinforce silos, that we really do work with boundary partners and collaboration. And yes, done well, it needs structure. We have an amazing program, our Heart and Hustle program. It's the number one priority for us in our business. It's overall our drive to have all of the key mechanisms in place to have the best possible client retention. But if you think of a couple of those, one of those big call outs is winning on service quality. And you can't do that unless you've got a great sense of teamwork, a sense of community, and a sense of collaboration. And it almost goes even further into the way we show up for our clients. We really bring a multi-layered relationship. You have an executive relationship with a client, you have a strategic account manager, an operational account manager, a consultant, people managing the in-life services, how that team come together as a community to get the best outcomes for our clients is really important. And it is measurable. You'll see it, we see it in our net promoter score. We see it in our client tenure, our loyalty scores. We see it in the willingness for our clients to buy more services from us. So there are really strong proof points around how community ensures you can deliver on your proposition, differentiate, and drive good results. Our NPS score went up 28 points last year. Our driver NPS score is plus 79. Those are really great outcomes. And I think it's because we are building and progressing this really strong team approach and community approach to serving our clients in the best ways we can.
I love what you said about basically clients don't really care how you're structured internally. That's like, I don't care. I just want to know how you serve me. In the outsourcing business, having been in that space myself for 3 decades, especially in the IT and technology area, trust plays a big role in how you get someone to basically hand over, in some cases, what is contextual to them, and in some cases it's not, but it's still, there's a lot of trust involved in a partner to be able to say, you're going to do something that I normally would take care of. How does that come into play? Have you noticed the need for that, and how do you support building that kind of trust with your clients and your partners to ensure that long-term relationship?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, trust is absolutely important. I mean, particularly in our world. I mean, I think everyone will say theirs is similar, but we're managing and operating hundreds and thousands of vehicles for clients, and so there has to be trust for that partnership to be successful. And the onus is on us to build the trust through a proven track record of success. And so that just puts even more emphasis on, how we need to play as a team so we can build that track record. But it also means we need to bring expertise to the table. We need to recognize the importance of relationship. We need to be accountable. Actually, clients are reasonable people. In the fleet world, not everything goes perfectly. Vehicles break down. Vehicles have accidents.
How many vehicles do you have on the road right now?
165,000.
So yeah, things are going to happen, right?
Wow.
Yeah,
By
absolutely.
the way, you got some fans here.
Hey, Kevin, good to see you.
So 165,000 vehicles on the road. Yeah, continue. I just wanted to make sure people get some perspective.
It's an important point because it's very often how you respond when things don't go along the happy path that really builds the trust. And my experience of our business is actually when you demonstrate and are accountable and make improvements because something hasn't necessarily gone in the right direction, actually that strengthens trust along the way. But, I do think that overall sense of trust, as you were calling out, Tullio, it is important. It's an important foundation. And it also contributes to what we're able to achieve. I talked about how important client retention is. Our client retention is tracking at 99%. That's a really strong stat. But the fact that within that, our clients are outsourcing more to us and actually outsourcing decision-making to us all comes from this increased trust along the way. And it is actually a blend of art and science. As I said, it brings a number of things together. It's how you make sure you make these steps. Another important call out is how you're improving the business. I am very, very aware and very clear with our team. Any day that we're not improving, we're going backwards. The world's moving so quickly these days. So you have to build trust with your clients of not only delivering today, but improving for tomorrow. And actually, we've just been through a really interesting exercise with our values. So we actually changed one of our value sets. We had innovation as a value. And don't get me wrong, innovation is really important. But we actually found that innovation had become a bit too big a word. So we actually rolled into evolution to actually demonstrate that improvements, even with a small I, are really valuable along the way. And I think that's allowed that sense of improvement, that sense of evolution to be more broadly owned. Whereas sometimes with innovation, it can feel like that's a big tech buzzword and isn't always relevant and resonates with everybody ultimately.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, innovation is evolution. It's like you're including what you had before, but you're transcending that somewhere that's usually new and novel. You see that all throughout life in all different areas. Thinking about that, that number you said, what, 99% retention. In order to get that, you've probably got some idea when maybe the trust is weakening or something like that, or signals where, hey, we just want to make sure we show up better in these certain circumstances. What do you guys do to kind of keep an eye on kind of the pulse when you've got all these different, 165,000 vehicles on the road and all these things where something might pop up and you're feeling, okay, we got to step up a little bit extra here?
Yeah, I think that's two things, Stephen. I would say that's basically making sure you've got a really good relationship in place, and making sure it's multi-layered. Not only multi-layered on our side, but multi-layered within the client side, so that you get a real, breadth of input along the way. But it's also about performance. And, I think sometimes, particularly with client experience, it can feel like client experience is about people just saying, try harder, push harder, serve better. But you have to also break it down into clear KPIs. So we really do try and break down our service delivery into very clear KPIs. Some of the really important improvements we're making, when you say them, they don't necessarily jump off the page, but they're really important. Last year, we decreased the order to delivery lead times for getting vehicles onto the road with our clients by 24%. Now, why is that important? It means that a client is getting a new vehicle on the road, which will very often be a more efficient vehicle, better cost structure, better fitting for the purpose of the role that they have, getting on the road sooner than it would have been in the past. So you have to keep, stretching with these improvements, as you say, evolving the business in the right way, because that really allows you to make sure that you've got both the performance that goes with the relationship along the way. I think there's other really important things. It's so important that from myself and all of the other leaders in the business, that we really role model the connection that's going to be needed, both within the business and within our client base as well. And also really be very clear on how important everybody is to the client proposition. I know you guys have heard it before. You can hear in organizations, people say, well, I don't work directly with a client, so client experience isn't that important for me. I've almost got zero tolerance for that. If you're not working directly for a client, you're working directly with somebody who is working directly with a client. And when we come back to this point about working across the horizontal, our clients don't care that part of the process is done by somebody that isn't client facing. It's still about responsiveness and elapsed time for them to achieve what they're achieving. And so I think really making sure we can be clear with everybody that everybody contributes to the client experience, everybody contributes to client retention, and then just keep communicating with transparency and honesty. For the people that we've got in the business, I think that's an important part of connection. When we got some things that haven't been going so well, we talk about it. And of course, when we've got things that are going well, we celebrate it and we recognize it. And I think that helps bring connection. It helps bring trust within the business. And I think that naturally leads to also greater trust outside. And you need to have the same with your clients. We have a client advisory board that we meet with regularly. They give us very honest feedback on how we're progressing, the good and the not so good. But then once you've had that discussion, you have to deliver. And, last year we went through a great piece of work. We had a client advisory board in March. They had a call out about a particular requirement around title and registration, which is a complex process. By September, we delivered the capability. and you talk about trust. When you can do that, then actually you get a really productive conversation, because then people will call out in a constructive way areas that need to improve, but they're doing it because you've developed the capability and shown the track record of being able to respond to it in the right way.
Yeah.
I love it. What I heard very clear is, I mean, you're in a transactional kind of business, right? You could be purely transactional, and but you focusing on the relationship and helping your team focus on the relationship. That's really always the differentiator. I'd be curious to learn from Stephen's next question, sort of how you do that, because that's not an easy thing to do, especially if you're traditionally in a kind of industry that's very transactionally oriented. To elevate it to that relationship focus and people focus, community focus is not an easy thing to do.
No, I mean, Tullio, I would say you're right. If you look at it on the ground, if you like, it is transactional. We're buying a vehicle, we're funding a vehicle, we're servicing a vehicle, we're fueling a vehicle. But actually what makes it a relationship and a partnership is the fact that we do all of those things, but represent it as one proposition. So when you go into Total View, our client portal, you've got all of the data from all of those different services. We wrap this up into, one monthly bill for our clients. Our consulting team is consulting on all of those different factors. So yes, underpinning it are, frankly, millions of transactions every year. But actually, the overall proposition is a much more strategic proposition. And I think the reason I've been in the industry for 32 years and I've always enjoyed about this industry is because vehicles are core business for our clients. And them being willing to outsource that to us is both a big responsibility for us, but it also makes for a much stronger partnership, actually.
And one of the things that we like to ask on the show is, and you're kind of going through this, and even before the show, we kind of talked a little bit about you've changed some things around preparing for growth. But as we grow, this is when culture often gets stretched. This is when, we're starting to bring in these systems, and we're thinking about those transactions and all those things, and speed, and often connection gets sometimes stepped on or stepped over or ignored. When you think about like systems or practices, we're always looking for, what kind of systems might have some form of like care or kindness, or where you're scaling, we always say where you're scaling love in some way. So when you think about your systems and you're scaling them, where do you see kind of where you can systemize kind of that maybe that kindness or that care or some element of that, across all these moving parts?
That's a great call out, Stephen. I mean, actually very relevant for our industry right now. I'll share a little bit on that in a minute. But I mean, I think this is, as you say, this is where the culture, the community, this is where it really makes a difference. And within that, there's a lot of empathy along the way as well. There's lots of ingredients. But we've just been through a really exciting process. We've launched our multi-year strategy and our vision to move America, merchants moving America, because that's what we do. I mean, we put vehicles on the road that allow our customers to win and sell and be productive along the way. And in that sort of presentation, that launch, you talk a lot about the what. What are we going to do? What segments are we going to tackle? What areas are we going to grow? But the reality is we also launched a very important message around the how. Our refreshed value set, our refreshed leadership connection to all of our employees. And that's the how. And for me, you can have, a knockout plan around the what, but unless the how, the foundation of the how is strong, it won't resonate and it won't be sustainable, because the how is how you live with setbacks. I mean, I always use, no plan survives contact with the enemy. The Mike Tyson version is everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. But that will happen and it won't always be of your own making. It can be macroeconomic, but the how is actually how you make sure that you can continue to progress as well. So this is extremely important for me. It's the reason I think people come to work. It's the reason why I still believe the most important relationship in our business is between an employee and their direct line manager, because people come to work because of who they work for, because of the team they work with, and the fact that they really do want to do the best job they can for our clients. And so the how, the culture, values, and behavior, and the connection that we inspire there is a really important part of leadership. And it's changing a lot. We're in this hybrid world where most leaders these days have a blend of in-person and remote employees. And it takes a lot for a leader to lean in at that point in time and not allow that to be a reason to be passive as a leader, to needing them to be progressive and proactive, to ensure that they can play the role they need to in bringing the community, role modeling the values, working with their team and sitting down and saying, what do these values mean for us? How will these show up for our boundary partners, our colleagues, and our clients along the way? And so the leadership ask is growing, but I really do think it's growing much more towards the community and the empathy of the world. And don't get me wrong, we do not want single models for leaders. We've got models that are extroverts and they're introverts, and we've got some who are amazing communicators and some who don't find communication as easy. But what we do want is leaders that are willing to be human, to be open enough to share what this means for them. A leader that sits with their team and says, this is what evolution means to me. This is what integrity means to me. This is what service means to me. What does it mean for you? I think those are the foundations that will really provide the longevity that we need. And, right now we're in an industry where actually some of our competitors are starting to withdraw resource from relationships. They're trying to have relationships managed in more of a pooling arrangement, whereas we still very much believe in a direct relationship and a multi-layered direct relationship. And I think that's part of hopefully where our leadership compass is in the right place, because it's recognizing the importance of that connection along the way.
Yeah, I like that.
Love everything. I'm sorry, just very quickly, but the operating rhythms play such a big role in how you show up in the market. We've talked about this so many times. Even as a marketing and ad agency, we're the kind of company that will ask whether there's alignment internally with what you're telling the market.
Of course.
Yeah. We want to make sure the how is really,
how is everything. Otherwise you show up inauthentic. You say one thing, but you're doing another. It doesn't work. And clients,
we had a great conversation with our client advisory board last month. And we shared with them, we hadn't actually launched it to our teams yet, but we shared with them, the values and the the direction and the strategy that we were positioning. And one of the first questions was, but how does this gain traction, on the ground, in the team? And so, you have to have those pieces of work. I mean, this process we've just been through, we've co-created a whole narrative around our story, the past, the current, and the future. And within that, it's got a strategic element and it's got a strong cultural element. And, as a team, we've launched that to all our employees in a face-to-face as well as a virtual session. But now the really important work starts, because that's when our whole leadership community take that to their employees. That's when we're really progressing, because that's the difference between nice words and nice slides and actually gaining traction with this within the organization, and ensuring that your customers can see the benefits of it.
Yeah. All right. So we've got an audience question here. Let's cue that up. Matt, this is from a LinkedIn user, how do you keep a global organization from feeling like a cold machine to the employees on the front lines?
Well, I think a lot of that is demonstrating the human side of the business. I started in this business at the beginning of last year, beginning of 2025. And, what was important for myself and all of the executive leadership team is that people really had good access to us. They knew what we stood for. They could hear from us along the way. And that this was not, transmit and dictate. This was, conversation, connection along the way. How else does it feel like a cog machine? Use the warm words. You haven't got it here, but if you look at our value sets right now, our values have service is the core value, and it's shaped like a love heart. It's in the middle of our value set. So be open to that. Be open to the emotional connection that you've got there. But I think also just ensuring that we continue to ensure that people understand what we do for our clients. I think it's so important that the whole of the business, particularly the leadership, are constantly fluent with our overall client proposition, and then can translate that into what they need for the team. Why? Because that will show how important service and actual the quality of our people and the quality of the service they deliver will be along the way. But also to just keep encouraging. It's so important that people can bring the best of themselves to work, and to know that that's appreciated and respected and recognized. When we did the launch of the 5-year plan and the values, the Moving America vision, I finished with the man in the arena quote, because it's so important that people feel they can take a step and, be able to, try some things, make some steps that in the past they might have felt were risky or, apprehensive to make. But we make them because we will learn and we will develop and we will grow. And we are very accepting of that. And, I think that helps to make it not feel cold, not to make it feel like there's only ever one correct answer to everything. And ultimately to make sure people feel it's fulfilling. I want people to feel that they're in a place where they are appreciated for the person that they are, that there's a good emotional connection with the business. They find it fulfilling. They're respected and they can connect to our values in the right way. And I know if they do that, we will differentiate ourselves in the market and give us the right basis to.
I love when a leader is talking about emotional connection, because for us as a marketing agency, this is what we want, is we want that emotional connection. We have to build it. But if there's not within the organization emotional connection with, leadership, employees working together, you're not going to have that emotional connection ultimately with your consumer. It's just not going to happen because it just won't be authentic. It'll just be the disconnect there, right? So I love that
I've got a good story for you, Stephen. So this was some time ago. This was when I was back in the UK, CEO of the LeasePlan UK business. So it's probably 2014, 2015. And we were working the long-term strategy of the business. And, we were really trying to land on the vision of this. And we debated a lot. And one of the suggestions was that our vision should be inspiring our customers to love leasing with us. And it's not easy to think of leasing as a subject that people can love, but actually, we went with it, and it was so powerful for us because when you use a word like that, it's unequivocal, right? There is no real gray at that point in time. And when you talk about inspiring our customers to love leasing with us, it just raises everybody up, because I think everybody then realizes that they can bring the best of themselves to contribute to that particular piece. So I agree with you. I think it's so important that warmth and that emotional connection is there. What we do every day in our working lives is too important to not have that type of connection.
I love it. We were talking about the how, Tullio. Let's get into maybe some of the why or the.
Yeah. I love that. Everything. We just had the CEO of ATEX on the show and talk about making tax is fun, right? You can have fun with things that are traditionally not considered fun,
Yeah.
or you can love something that would normally not be something you would associate love with. So let's talk a little bit like the why behind everything, right? Because we love what you're saying, and even for employees, it's so important for them to have a purpose tied to their work. It gives meaning behind what they're doing. A lot of studies, according to PwC, 79% of employees actually say purpose is a key factor in their work. And today's workforce is evolving. The expectations around leadership, culture, and connections are changing very rapidly. What leadership shifts are required, in your opinion, to meet those expectations while also continuing to drive performance?
Yeah, it's a good question, Tullio, because I think this is a big part of the progression that's underway. I would bring it back to the client side as well. When we talk about this purpose, I think it's really important that all leaders can talk with authority and confidence on the role that we play for our clients. And, I think, if I go back just a few years, as I said before, you had parts of the organization that could almost say, well, I'm back office, or I'm shared service, or whatever else I am. I'm not so client facing. And I think where we are now, no matter where people are sitting in the organization, they want to know the bigger purpose that they're playing. And actually for us, it allows us also to do that whilst showing, really important dimensions of our client. I mean, we're a big player in the last mile delivery space. That's relatively easy to understand. We all know cargo vans that are driving through neighborhoods, delivering packages to front doors. But if you look at some other big industries that we're playing out in, there's a lot of consolidation playing out right now in the HVAC industry. And so articulating for all our people that the vehicles that we put on the road and the services that we put behind them actually allow an HVAC installer to get X number of installations out of their day. And the fact that, we can be proactive with them around when a vehicle needs to be serviced, or recommend where they should be going for a service along the way, is all contributing to greater uptime. And I think when you put it in that language, people then do really see how we're contributing to our clients and allowing them to win. And, you also have to sort of show the success stories. We've got a number of clients where we start with maybe a couple of 100, 200, 300 vehicles. It can start as a regional relationship, but actually, two or three of them have become 3,000, 4,000 vehicle fleets and become national champions in their own industry. And I think that ability to understand that, for us to communicate on that basis and to sort of recognize and share, really helps with the purpose that people feel around the role that they're playing. And as I said, I also think it's so important that, we show a very human face, that we recognize how important engagement actually is. Role modeling is so important. I mean, you guys know it. I mean, when you are your authentic self and you can show yourself to your employee base and your customer base, and they can see the type of person you are, the authentic values and priorities that you have, this helps people find a purpose as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot within that. And I also I'll just add one last one, showing trust and confidence in people. People within the business will recognize this. I'm always asking people to assume positive intent. We really, however anybody's showing up, they're doing it for positive reasons. The very, very, very large majority of people are showing up with positive reasons. And so let's assume positive intent. Let's assume the glass is half full, and then go on that journey. And that will only then be fulfilling, I think, if you approach it in that way.
I want to circle back a little bit onto the love leasing, concept, because we often talk about, what role should love play in business, and so I just want to dive in there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what role should love playing business. But I also want to dive into like those details of what, loving to love leasing. How does that play out in in these tiny different ways? If you can kind of articulate both those.
Well, I think it shows up right across what we do, actually. If I think about every single process that we run in the business, it's got a love element to it. What do I mean by that? How we order a vehicle, how we specify a vehicle, the expertise that we bring to our clients to show them that we care and we are recommending that they specify a vehicle. So what does that mean? What's the best make, model, option selection for them? Just us recommending that to them is love in a way, because we're recommending what we think will work best for them. A lot of the time, one of the big topics there is safety. We want the best possible safety equipment within the specification of the vehicle. Why? Because we know one of the most important thing is drivers stay healthy, stay well, stay productive, and feel safe and secure in the vehicles that they have, that their customers or their employers are providing with them. But also, I think responsiveness. I mean, I know responsiveness does not equal love, but I think in the customer service world, it does. I think we all recognize that post-COVID, responsiveness really became a bit of a punch bag because, it deteriorated significantly. But it's so important in a customer service, customer experience business like ours, because, the fact that when someone phones or someone emails, you deploy active listening, you make sure you understand what they're saying to you, you make sure you can crystallize it for them, and then you are also clear on what you will do and when you will follow up with them. And even if you don't have an answer, you check in to give people an update. That, I think, is love, because that's showing a care and attention and an appreciation of someone else's situation, in order to make sure we can be responsive and serve in the best way that we possibly can. And I go back to that driver NPS score. I mean, plus 79. Someone told me that it's better than Disney's NPS score. But in the grand scheme of things, that is that driver NPS. So that how we measure that is a driver has phoned us with a question or an issue or an ask, and in the way that we respond that, we have actually responded in a way for that particular driver that post interaction, when asked the net promoter score, we're achieving on average a plus 79. In terms of overall performance, and that for me is that means there's good emotion and warmth and connection within that and what we're doing for our clients.
Yeah, I love that. I love going back to, I know you talked about the safety in the vehicles, but you mentioned kind of doing what's in the best interest of the client, because oftentimes in business we're so focused on just the transaction, like getting the bigger sale, and maybe that's not in the best interest of the client, but you're focusing, but love and love leasing, that love portion comes out, well, what's really in the best interest for the client? Like it's a small switch, but when you're thinking through that and you're thinking through that lens, that's where you suddenly, you're really trying to look out for their best needs. And this is where you can build real connection by doing these loving things. Like you pointed out, there's a dozen little tiny loving things of your business that really come to play because you're caring for ultimately some other human beings in some way.
Let me give you another example. Title and registration is a really big topic in our business. As you guys know, 50 states, each of them have their own regimes. Within the states, individual counties have their own title and registration challenges. We have to do initial registration, which is when the vehicle is new, and then we have to do renewal, etc. And the brand promise of our title and registration team is reg or die. Why? Because they are absolutely driven to ensure that every vehicle stays on the road and compliant. And that is also a love, because it really shows a high degree of care and attention to ensure that we are looking after the client and making sure they're productive. And just the brand promise themselves shows the impact and the importance that they have. That's what it means to them, because they know that will pay off in a really positive way for our clients. So yeah, absolutely, it's embedded in every single one of the processes that we have along the way.
Okay, so we're up on time, unfortunately. Love to dig some more, but we'll have to continue the conversation when we go off.
Sure.
I want to dig into that heart and hustle a little bit more. But
yeah,
if we had to give the audience a gift today, just one thing they should focus on to help them build community and connection, if they remember only one thing, what would that be?
I think making the connection in a personal way, and I'm thinking particularly from a leadership perspective. As I said, I think it is so important. I really, really do believe that the most important relationship in a business is between an employee and their direct line manager. They can hear from me as a CEO. They'll hear from me every month. They'll hear from me every couple of weeks via email. They'll hear from other executive leaders. But what really brings the traction and engagement, and making that discussion, both on an individual basis and within a team setting, a really human discussion, and talking about why this is important to us, what it means, and really making sure that whether it's values or client focus or the process they run and what it means, it connects at a deeper level rather than just sounding like sound bites or headlines. I think that for me is something I've always tried to pursue in my career. I'm not a very good poker player. I'm a very open sort of guy, but I want to share and connect at a level, and I will tell people why something is important to me and what it is that really motivates me about a value, a strategy, or an initiative. And I just would encourage people to be willing to share that, because I know not everybody is, but I can tell you how big a difference it makes when you do.
Love it. Manage stuff, connect with people. If people want to get to know you, learn about your business, how do they find you? How do they connect?
Yeah, merchantsfleet.com is the place to go. We've got a great business, so much breadth in terms of what we do. Everything from multi-year leasing and fleet management to multi-month rental and fleet management. We are also a used car dealership along the way as well. So great history in the business, but great breadth as well. But that's where they can come and find us.
Matt, thank you for joining us. Thank you to our audience. Great questions, and thanks for tuning in. If you can love leasing, you can love any other business. There's no reason you can't. I mean, you just have to think about it. You just have to think about it. Like, we bring on these examples of these businesses from all these different, spaces and industries and stuff, and just to show how care, compassion, love, how these things really can show up no matter what. And so please kind of look at your business, consider how, these things can show up with you, with your leadership, with the systems that you build, the how and the why, as we talked about. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Tullio. Yeah, appreciate it.
See you next time on the Bliss Business Podcast.